So to give you an idea just quickly of who I am. So I came from a consulting background in schools in Australia. I consulted on data engineering, data warehouses, data analytics. I've been doing it for nearly 20 years now. And I founded this business with my co-founder, Josh, who comes from a background in data engineering for big banks and major corporates in Australia. In 4 years since we launched, we're in about 1,000 schools at the moment across Australia, New Zealand, and we're starting to grow fairly rapidly internationally as well. At our core, we do data warehousing, data automation, and analytics as a service. And you can pick and choose which parts of those things that we do. But we truly have become the kind of the go-to experts, at least in our little corner of the world. And we're keen to see if we can help schools more broadly. By the way, we specifically work with K-12 schools. We don't work with anyone else. That's all we do.
Dave, really quickly, when you talk about data automation, so are you talking about triggers, or are you talking about bringing data into your system?
Bit of everything. So we automate bringing data in. We automate actions based on something that's happening in data. There's all sorts of things that we can do with the platform. What I'll really quickly cover, though, is this framework that we call for data literacy for teaching. And this is a framework that we've developed. We're actually a part of the University of Melbourne. So we're on campus at an educational institution. Everything that we do is research backed. So everything that I will show you in a few minutes comes with significant research into the way that it works, the way that it's interpreted. But this data literacy for teaching framework kind of identifies these 5 steps in data projects in schools. And you can see most schools start here with identifying needs and strategic goals. Obviously, there's the technical component of collecting and bringing that data together, which a number of you have mentioned so far. Stage 3 is turning that data into information, 4, information into decisions, and then repeating that process. But what we are finding when we're walking into schools for the first time, or as we've discovered over a number of years now, schools are spending schools and groups of schools, I should mention, are spending a huge amount of time in these stages here, but they're not necessarily spending all that much time in stages 4 and 5. So it's all about the tech, like let's build the tech to bring the data together. Let's build out these visuals. But because so much time and effort is being spent on those 2 things, there's not as much effort on actually affecting change in the classroom, changing and creating positive outcomes for students. So what we try and do is, I'll just jump across here, is automate a lot of those stages. So we automate stages 2, 3, and parts of 4, so that schools can really focus on 4 and parts of 3 if you wish. I'll cover how that works in just a second. There's 3 key components to our stack. So the first is data ops. And I can already hear that that's probably broadly applicable, because what data ops does is it connects to all of your different data sources in a school or in groups of schools. It takes all of that data automatically on a daily or even hourly or instantly basis and pumps that into a managed data warehouse. That data warehouse has been built by us with specific K-12 education use in mind. So it's designed to work for education purposes. Some schools that we work with just stop there. So we do their data ops, we bring all their data together and we pump it into our managed data warehouse. And then they connect to it with Google Looker or Power BI or whatever they want to. But what we do for most of our schools is that we then take it the extra step and we provide an analytical layer. So our analytics are designed to do about 80 to 90% of what schools actually need. So things like attendance, behavior, grades, well-being, all sorts of data that you've got across the school. But then give the schools that want to extend upon it the option to do so. And then the final layer of our stack is Pulse. And Pulse is proactive. So it automatically identifies when students are approaching a risk profile. So it'll send a notification to the right person at the right time that says, this student is at risk of X, Y, Z. You need to take action. All sorts of things that we can do with Pulse. Any questions before I jump into actually what the product looks like?
I have a question. Is this particularly geared for the schools, or is it also geared toward the students so that students will be able to mine their own data and see where they are with respects to their other members of their cohort, and also tangentially to that, parents, in terms of a way for parents to log in and see various things, or is that kind of future state?
No, students can log into the platform, parents can log into the platform. It's available to whoever you want to make it available to, and it's all got full access control built in. So a student's never going to see data that they shouldn't, or a parent, or vice versa.
Okay.
I can see there's a question there from Charles. So we have an integration list that exceeds 50 different MISs and different platforms at the moment. It's available on our website. I'll send you a link at the end, but the short answer is that we support most major SIS vendors. And if we don't, we typically turn around connectors for new SIS vendors in about 12 weeks. We're very used to building out new things. And for those of you that are in groups of schools as well, just one thing that I thought I'd raise. We work with a number of groups of schools in Australia. The biggest, I think, has about 500-ish schools. And each of those schools often has a different system. So they've got a different SIS or MIS rather, or a different LMS. Our model's capable of standardizing all of that data across multiple schools and then unifying it at an enterprise level. So if you want to do analytics across all of your schools, it's got all of the master data management tools that you need built in. It has the capability of normalizing data across those different types of systems. And schools can still have the freedom to modify things as they see fit for their particular school, whilst maintaining integrity at that enterprise layer. All right. There's diagrams and all sorts of things in this slide deck that I'll share with you afterwards, but I won't get too far into it. I should introduce you to the actual platform though. And again, please feel free to jump in and ask questions as I'm going along. But in our platform, we have, I'll stick with analytics for the time being, just for the sake of simplicity and being aware of the time. But we are looking at our analytics from an individual school's perspective here. And at the moment, I'm logged in as a teacher. This is available to me in our native app, but also—
I think so, Dave. I think you're not currently sharing the screen of the app.
Sorry. I knew I should have said when I started this, I love Google 3 times, and I'm sure it would have worked for me. Yeah. There we go.
Perfect.
Cool. So this is what it looks like for a teacher. This is what it looks like in our native application as well. And I can show you if I click here. Well, this is actually sitting inside Canvas. Or if you've got another LMS like Schoolbox or Schoology, our application actually embeds inside of the LMS so that teachers and students don't have to then log into something else. It's all in front of them in a system that they're used to using. I'll jump into an individual student view just to start things off. I'll pick on Eric. So our system has the concept of bringing data to a high level for easy consumption. In this particular instance, we've created what we call indicators. And this is based on the calculations that the school has set. So we've calculated an achievement indicator and an attendance indicator for this particular student. But you might want to create a well-being indicator or a preparedness for class or happiness or whatever it might be. Whatever data you have available to you, you can use to calculate and create indicators, which are then summarized for teachers and students at a glance on this first page. We can bring together all of your attendance data. So if you're using a system or your MIS likely tracks all of your attendance, but you might be using something like Clipboard or School Buddy or whatever else to manage extracurricular attendance as well. And this screen will actually unify that all into the one place. So this particular example here, I've got data coming from my MIS, which is the lessons of the day, and I can see when a student's present or not present in class. But I can also see that this student's done, what's this, football after school and was present. More football, this kid likes football. So we can bring all of that into the one space, and again, report on that at an enterprise level if we need to as well. You'll see themes like traffic lighting throughout our platform. You don't necessarily have to use these colors. They're not necessarily the best for accessibility, but we use them for simplicity in the demos. But the idea is that all of your data types can be configured to have different risk levels. So you might consider a student that's got attendance above 95% to be low risk, whereas a student that's below 85 is high risk. You can track student achievement longitudinally across all of the different learning areas that you have in the school. Learning areas, faculties, terminology differs depending on where you are. I can drill down into English and see all of the different subject results that I've got for English. And then I can even drill down to the next layer and see, all right, here are all of the tasks, what the weights are for those tasks, and whether or not we're using them in the calculations that we have presented. I just saw a question pop up about boarding data, I think. Yes. So we currently integrate with Reach boarding, if you have boarding, Reach. And we're working with Aura. I never quite say that one right.
Yeah, Aura is the one that we use.
Yeah, okay, cool.
The boarding word, yep.
So that one's a work in progress. So all of this can come in. Obviously, I'm using a percentage grade scale here at the moment, but some schools change this to A to E, or it might be the 1 to 7 scale for IB, whatever you need. You can even have multiple scales measured on the same screen. So you might have half of this as percentage and half of it as the IB scale, depending on the school's needs. Everything's summarized at the bottom of the screen as well. We bring in all of your standardized testing data, so things like MAP, if you're doing Cat 4, most standardized testing data types can be loaded in fully automatically. There's no massaging of the data required. You just upload the file that you get from the testing provider, and our system does all the hard work for you. And then you get these charts as an output, clearly showing what you'd expect to see from standardized testing results. And these will look slightly different as well for different tests, because we do try to work with the testing providers to make sure that we're presenting the data that the way that they consider their testing data should be presented. We can do things like compare students' growth. So see if a student's going forwards or backwards in a class. We can compare a student, instead of comparing them to themselves, we can compare them to similar students. So the system bands all of the students together in the back end and compares the students' growth and says, all right, well, Eric here is moving or growing at a rate that's 12-ish% faster than his peers. And then bringing in things like tasks. So understanding who's submitting work on time, whether it's submitted on time to particular teachers or not, or for particular classes. It's a good way of measuring engagement. Depending on the school as well, they might add in extra tabs. So if they want to embed a Power BI chart that they've done that is specific to the way that they do behavior tracking, they can add a tab in here and embed that here. So that's looking at an individual student. But what we can also do is look at an entire cohort of students. So if I jump in and I look at, say, year 10, actually, yeah, I might go into year 11. I think that's got some better data. So these indicators are the same ones that I mentioned on the learner profile, but summarized for the entire cohort of students that I have in front of me, and I get a summary at the bottom of all the data. I can see all of my attendance data. So all of the students are grouped into those risk profiles, and I might want to pick on the students that are high risk for this semester. Can I start to unpick things and see, well, Emma here, Emma's attendance is really quite low this semester, but it's progressively been going backwards over time. So there might be a story there that we can start to uncover. This is highlighting the fact that this has happened. We don't necessarily have all the answers. Data can't give you everything, but it can certainly give you a good head start on catching these things. Achievement, so visualizing the way that students are moving through a cohort. So I can see that Darcy's a bit boring. Darcy's been in band 8 the entire time, but Abigail started in band 6, moved up to band 8, and then dropped back to band 6. And these bands as well can be configured different ways. So this is just a standard percentage grouping band, but you might use a bell curve, or you could use your A to E grade scales. This is visualized different ways for practically, it feels like every school that we work with, but maybe not. Simple ranking tools, really easy to use. It is what it is. I won't go too far into it, as long as my internet hasn't balked on me. No, it hasn't. There we go. But where we start to get really powerful is this standardized testing assessment or standardized testing analysis tool. So when we're looking at a cohort of students, we can bring in every question to on every test that every student has answered. And we can calculate the zone of proximal development for every student that's taken that test. What we then do is summarize that data so that if I'm a mathematics teacher walking into a class for the first time, and I know that they did a standardized test not long before I started teaching or took up this class, I can look at this numeracy table here and say, all right, well, there are 30 students that should have mastered this particular skill in the cohort that I'm working with. And I can drill down and see exactly who those students are, and whether or not this is something that those students should be focusing on, or if it's not in their zone of proximal development, whether or not it's a skill that they might not quite be ready for. That can be really useful when planning for teachers, and we are starting to work on models that will actually start to suggest content for teachers to use based on the tools that they're using within the school to help bridge those gaps. You can triangulate data as well. So if you wanted to look at multiple different types of standardized testing providers, these are 2 that are available in Australia, but it works the same for ones that are available anywhere on the planet. I can say, all right, I want to look at reading, spelling, writing, and English. And then I'll pick on Regan. And this is interesting. Regan's aptitude for writing, reading, and spelling has been measured quite high by Orwell, which is the standard testing provider. But his performance in English per the school is at the complete opposite end of the scale. So you can start to unpack things that like this are a significant discrepancy and build strategies to remediate those. And then finally, again, the summary of tasks. So looking at how often, like Taylor here, for example, is only submitting work on time 68% of the time. And then I can drill down and start to understand all those sorts of things that I showed you in the learner profile as well. So I've done individual learners. I've done a quick rundown of cohorts. We can do a whole bunch of other things as well that I probably won't get too stuck into in this session because it takes a little bit to get the complexities of how it works across. But things like moderating tasks. So understanding if you've got a fairly big school and there's 5 classes in 1 year level and they've all done the same assessment tasks, are they being marked fairly? Is the moderation system that's in place working? or even comparing tasks. If they did a task on Frankenstein in year 10 in 2022, and they did the same task in 2023 and again in 2024, what is the difference in performance between the cohorts over those 3 years? What I haven't touched on at all yet, though, is our proactive analytics. So we've looked at charts, and they're fine. Like, charts are cool, but they're really the beginning, and they're not the solution. Particularly for teachers that are time poor, and for schools that have got particularly bigger schools, a tool like Pulse is really, really, really quite useful. So Pulse is the tool that lets you say, all right, in my school, I want to watch for 10 low-level misdemeanors in a term or a quarter, or whatever the terminology that you use is. And then I'm going to watch for behavior incidents. I'm going to leave this blank because I want all of my incidents. I might watch all actively enrolled students, or I could just watch a particular campus. Or if I'm a multi-academy trust or a group of schools, I could watch a particular school. But in this example, I'm just going to use all students. And then I want to watch and say, for a threshold of 10 incidents in the current term, and I want that notification to go to the student's homeroom teacher and perhaps their year level coordinator. So what this does is watch for those data points through the system. And this is a good example because if you've got a student that has previously not had behavioral issues, and all of a sudden they've had 10 like minor incidents across a period, but it might have happened across 6 different teachers over 8 different weeks in different classes, and it might not be something that's picked up in general discourse, but this is a genuine indicator that a student is heading towards a risk profile. This will pick that up and then notify. It knows who that particular student's homeroom teacher is, and it knows who their year level coordinator is. It's context aware in the school because it reads your timetables. That notification just gets delivered to those people, so you're not creating notification noise. If you want to get really fancy, I mean, this by default delivers via email, but if you want to get fancy, you can do webhooks and all sorts of other things, and trigger notifications through bespoke systems, or if you have a school app, you can push notifications out through your school app with a webhook. All sorts of cool and interesting things.